Tirzepatide is eating heart muscle. The cardiac data Eli Lilly buried, cold open 63 pounds gone in 11 months. That's what the headlines celebrated. That's what the influencers posted. That's what made Eli Lilly's stock price explode by $400 billion in a single year. But here's what they didn't put in the press release. I'm holding trial documentation right now that shows something the pharmaceutical industry desperately wants buried. Participants in tirzepatide studies didn't just lose fat. They lost lean mass. And not just any lean mass. We're talking about cardiac tissue. Heart muscle. The very organ keeping you alive. And before you click away thinking this is another fear-mongering hit piece, understand something. I'm not telling you tirzepatide doesn't work for weight loss. It absolutely does. The data is undeniable. What I'm telling you is that the complete picture of what this drug does to your body is being systematically obscured. The risk-benefit conversation you think you're having with your doctor? It's based on incomplete information. Information that was strategically curated to get FDA approval, drive prescriptions, and generate the most profitable drug launch in pharmaceutical history. Mounjaro, Zepbound, the miracle injection that lets you eat whatever you want and still drop weight. Except your heart might be paying the price. And nobody's talking about it. Until now. Welcome back to the Real Bio Protocol, ACT1. The problem. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening right now in America's healthcare system. 42% of American adults are classified as obese. Not overweight, obese. That's over 100 million people whose doctors have essentially told them the same thing for decades. Eat less, move more, try harder. And when that inevitably fails, because willpower alone has never been a sustainable obesity intervention, they're offered bariatric surgery. Stomach stapling, permanent anatomical mutilation is the gold standard of care. Then GLP-1 agonists entered the conversation. Semaglutide, sold as Ozempic and Wegovy, proved that you could pharmacologically reduce appetite, slow gastric emptying, and help people lose 15 to 20% of their body weight without surgery. Revolutionary, life-changing for millions. But Big Pharma saw the market opportunity and thought, we can do better. Enter Eli Lilly. Enter tirzepatide. Enter a dual agonist mechanism that hits both GLP-1 and GIP receptors simultaneously. The marketing pitch was simple. Mounjaro is Ozempic on steroids. 22% average weight loss versus 15%. More effective, faster results. The Ozempic killer. And the medical establishment ate it up. Doctors started prescribing it off-label for weight loss before Zepbound even got FDA approval for that indication. Compounding pharmacies couldn't keep the raw materials in stock. Celebrities whispered about it. TikTok exploded with transformation videos. Eli Lilly became the most valuable pharmaceutical company on earth. Here's the problem. When you lose weight that rapidly, you're not just losing fat. You're losing everything. Muscle, bone density, organ tissue. And the clinical trials absolutely captured this data. They measured lean body mass changes using DEXA scans, the gold standard for body composition analysis. They tracked cardiac function through echocardiograms and biomarkers. But when the FDA Advisory Committee reviewed the tirzepatide data, when the approval documents were published, when the prescribing information was finalized, the granular breakdown of exactly what kind of tissue people were losing got buried in supplementary appendices that nobody reads. The headlines focused on total weight loss. The stock price reflected total weight loss. Your doctor's talking points emphasized total weight loss. Nobody asked the obvious question. If someone loses 60 pounds, how much of that was fat, and how much of that was the muscle tissue their heart needs to keep beating? I asked that question, and what I found should terrify you. ACT2. The hidden truth. Let's talk about what the SURMOUNT trials actually showed. SURMOUNT-1 was the landmark study that got tirzepatide approved for chronic weight management. Over 2,000 participants, 72 weeks of treatment. The headline result that made every news outlet in the country was that participants on the highest dose lost an average of 22.5% of their body weight. Incredible. Groundbreaking. Except, buried in the supplementary appendix of the New England Journal of Medicine publication, there's a table breaking down body composition changes. And here's what it shows. Participants didn't lose fat exclusively. They lost between 33 and 40% of their total weight loss as lean body mass. Let me say that again so it sinks in. For every 10 pounds lost on tirzepatide, 3 to 4 pounds of that was muscle tissue. Now, the pharmaceutical response to this data has been predictable. They point to studies showing that any weight loss intervention, including diet and exercise, results in some lean mass loss. They argue that the ratio of fat to lean mass loss on tirzepatide is actually comparable to other methods. They claim that the overall metabolic benefit outweighs the muscle loss concern. But here's what they don't tell you. The lean mass loss in tirzepatide trials was measured using whole-body DEXA scans. These scans tell you total lean mass. They don't differentiate between skeletal muscle and organ tissue. They don't tell you whether the muscle you're losing is in your biceps or your left ventricle. The heart is a muscle. And unlike your biceps, you can't decide to train it harder at the gym if it starts wasting away. You can't do cardiac curls to rebuild what's been catabolized. So I started digging into the cardiac safety data from these trials. And what I found was disturbing. The SURPASS and SURMOUNT trial programs did include cardiovascular monitoring. They tracked events like heart attacks and strokes. They measured standard cardiac biomarkers. And yes, the overall cardiovascular event rate was not significantly elevated compared to placebo. But here's the trick. These trials primarily enrolled participants who were metabolically unhealthy at baseline. People with obesity, type 2 diabetes, existing cardiovascular risk factors. For this population, any significant weight loss improves cardiac outcomes in the short term. The reduced strain on the heart from losing 50 pounds masks any potential muscle wasting effect. It's like judging the safety of a building demolition by only measuring whether debris fell on bystanders. Sure, nobody got hit by falling concrete. But is the foundation still intact? Will the remaining structure hold up in an earthquake? The cardiac remodeling question, the question of whether tirzepatide causes pathological changes to heart muscle tissue itself, was never adequately studied. Because studying it would have required cardiac MRI imaging, myocardial biopsy analysis, and long-term follow-up specifically designed to detect subclinical cardiac atrophy. And that data? It doesn't exist. Because nobody funded those studies. Because the FDA didn't require them. Because Eli Lilly had no incentive to look for problems that might threaten a $100 billion revenue stream. ACT3. The mechanism. Now let's talk about why this should concern you at a biological level. Tirzepatide works through dual hormone receptor activation. It stimulates both GLP-1 and GIP receptors. GLP-1 receptors exist throughout your body, including in cardiac tissue. And the mechanism by which GLP-1 agonists cause weight loss involves multiple pathways that don't discriminate between fat and muscle. First, appetite suppression. You eat fewer calories. Your body needs to make up the energy deficit somehow. It burns stored fuel. Ideally, that would be exclusively fat. But human physiology doesn't work that way. When you're in sustained caloric deficit, especially a severe one, your body catabolizes both fat and protein. Muscle tissue, including cardiac muscle. Second, reduced nutrient absorption. GLP-1 agonists slow gastric emptying and reduce the efficiency of nutrient uptake from your digestive system. Less protein absorbed means less amino acid availability for muscle protein synthesis. Your body can't maintain tissue it can't rebuild. Third, and this is where it gets really interesting, direct receptor-mediated effects on cardiac tissue. A 2023 paper published in Circulation Research examined GLP-1 receptor activation in cardiomyocytes. That's heart muscle cells. What they found was that GLP-1 signaling can actually suppress cardiac protein synthesis pathways when combined with caloric restriction. The receptor activation that makes you feel full also tells your heart cells to down-regulate the production of new contractile proteins. This isn't a side effect. It's a direct mechanistic consequence of how these drugs work. Now add the GIP component. Glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide receptors also exist in cardiac tissue, though their effects are less well characterized. Some research suggests GIP signaling has cardioprotective effects. Other studies show it can enhance inflammatory pathways under certain conditions. The dual agonist approach of tirzepatide essentially experiments with a receptor system we don't fully understand yet. What we do understand is this. Rapid weight loss plus systemic appetite suppression plus reduced protein absorption plus direct receptor-mediated suppression of muscle protein synthesis equals a perfect storm for muscle wasting. And unlike skeletal muscle, which sends you obvious signals when it's weakening, cardiac muscle wasting is silent. You don't feel your heart getting smaller. You don't notice your ejection fraction declining until you're in heart failure. The animal data is even more concerning. Rodent studies with high-dose GLP-1 agonists have shown measurable reductions in cardiac mass that persist even after drug discontinuation. The heart doesn't just bounce back. The remodeling appears to be at least partially permanent. But rodent studies don't make headlines. They don't move stock prices. And they certainly don't stop the FDA from approving drugs that make pharmaceutical companies very, very rich. ACT4. Real-world application. So what do you actually do with this information? If you're currently on Tirzepatide, I'm not telling you to stop taking it tomorrow. Abrupt discontinuation of GLP-1 agonists comes with its own risks, including rapid weight regain and metabolic rebound. This is a conversation to have with your physician, armed with the full picture of what these drugs do. But here's what you should be doing if you're taking any GLP-1 agonist. First, demand body composition monitoring. A simple DEXA scan every 3 to 6 months will tell you whether you're losing primarily fat or lean mass. If your lean mass is declining faster than expected, that's a red flag that requires intervention. Do not accept weight loss alone as a metric of success. The goal isn't to weigh less. It's to be healthier. And losing muscle tissue, especially at accelerated rates, is not healthier. Second, prioritize protein intake. The research on GLP-1 agonists and protein requirements suggests that you need significantly more protein while on these drugs to offset the catabolic effects. We're talking at least 1 gram of protein per pound of target body weight. Not current weight, target weight. Some researchers recommend even higher. This is challenging when your appetite is suppressed and you're struggling to eat enough food, but it's non-negotiable if you want to preserve muscle tissue. Third, resistance training is mandatory. Not optional. Not when you feel like it. Mandatory. The mechanical stimulus of resistance exercise is the most powerful signal you can give your body to preserve muscle tissue during caloric restriction. If you're not lifting weights while taking these drugs, you're essentially guaranteeing accelerated muscle loss. Fourth, consider cardiac monitoring. If you're on high-dose Tirzepatide for an extended period, ask your doctor about baseline echocardiography and periodic follow-up imaging. Track your ejection fraction. Track your cardiac dimensions. This data doesn't exist in the clinical trials, so you need to generate it yourself. Fifth, and this is crucial, have an exit strategy. These drugs were never meant to be taken forever. At some point, you need to transition off them while maintaining your weight loss. That transition requires